Starmer of the Labour Party have had their first televised debate in the UK's general election campaign so far. Both men battled to make their views on healthcare, taxation, and the defence of their political allies uppermost. But it remains to be seen where the pendulum will swing on the 4th of July. We have a report.
Security is safer in his hands.
The leaders of the United Kingdom's two top political parties have faced off in their first live televised debate of the election campaign, attacking each other over issues from tax to immigration and the National Health Service. Conservative Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition Labour Party, took the floor in the northwestern town of Salford in a debate that focused on controversial matters. Mr. Sunak, whose party is behind by about 20 percentage points in the opinion polls, took a combative approach, lashing out at the Labour Party over differences on taxation, claiming his party has seen to a reduction in inflation. The Labour leader Keir Starmer pointed to the chaos of the more recent past, which saw the removal of then Prime Minister Boris Johnson amid money and ethics scandals, and the brief controversial 49-day tenure of Liz Truss, whose tax-cutting plans sent mortgages soaring. Mr. Keir Starmer said the July 4th election will be a choice between more chaos and division with the Conservatives and turning the page and rebuilding with the Labour Party. Prime Minister Sunak, a former banker and one of the UK's richest people, seemed to make up some ground with the audience while discussing how he planned to tackle immigration, leaning on his controversial plan to send certain asylum seekers to Rwanda as a deterrent. The Labour leader Keir Starmer said he also had a plan to tackle immigration and that he would consider processing asylum claims in a third country as long as it did not breach international law.
Now, for more on the UK's political terrain and its upcoming election, I am now being joined from London in the United Kingdom by political commentator Nathaniel Oguniyi. Good to have you join us.
Good afternoon.
So let's get your first thought on the debate. Did any of the front runner display an understanding of the issues?
Yes, so when it comes to style in debate, I think Keir Starmer, although he has been a barrister, although he's been a lawyer for many years, didn't quite have the edge that many people thought he would. Rishi Sunak is a renowned debater. He was actually sent to the debate in 2019. The last time the UK had an election was in December 2019. And back then, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, didn't wish to attend one of these debates. And so he sent Rishi Sunak, who was then a junior minister, in his place. Rishi Sunak has had experience doing that. He's had experience debating other leadership contests too. So within the Conservative Party, he was in the leadership debates against Liz Truss for the leadership last year, and 2 years ago now. But he was in those debates, so he has a bit of experience with these things. When it comes to Sir Keir Starmer, a poll that came out immediately after the result yesterday suggested that Rishi Sunak had won that debate. And the interesting thing there is that although the poll might have suggested that Rishi Sunak was the more popular of the two debaters, that hasn't necessarily meant that he has the lead in the polls.
And that's where, sorry to interrupt you, that's where I really wanted to go next, because it looks like two different realities. You were talking about the YouGov snap poll that gave Sunak a slight edge, that with 51%, and that's when you compared with for Keir Starmer, which was 49%. But you were going to talk about the Tories trailing behind Labour in the polls, and that's with about 20 points. And one wonder, will this debate matter in the end when it comes to the polls?
So the debate is one of many milestones within the campaign. There's this debate, there's another debate on Friday. In fact, I think there are a total of 7 debates taking place, not all of which Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer are expected to attend. But there are a number of debates taking place. There will also be the launch of the party manifestos, which set out their programs for government, what they would like to do over the next 5 years. And so those are all key moments that could shift the dial. But in terms of winning an election, no. Debates tend not to be the winning factor. Although back in 2010, the Liberal Democrats outperformed in one of their debates, and that gave them a much higher national profile and denied the Conservative Party an outright majority. It meant the Conservative Party had to go into coalition with the Liberal Democrats.
And it's interesting you mentioned the debate on Friday. That's the 7-party debate that would have Nigel Farage also participating as the leader of the Reform Party. His return has sort of sparked some sort of concern in the Tory because they wonder if he does well in that debate, the impact it will have on them. What's the implication of the return of Farage in the whole election process?
So I think the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, made a note yesterday, or made a point yesterday, that a vote for anybody other than Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party is a vote for Labour. And he made that point because in a number of seats across the country, including Clacton, where Nigel Farage is standing, there is a risk that voting for reform, which is on the right side of the political spectrum, would lead to a Labour candidate getting in, when indeed the majority of people who vote for reform would prefer a reform or Conservative candidate rather than a Labour one. And so there's a difficulty there whereby by voting for reform, actually, a good number of seats could end up with a Labour MP, even though the Conservative plus reform vote would be more than Labour, and the majority of reform voters would prefer a Conservative candidate than a Labour one.
And the Conservatives, again, Lib Dems, who lost the election in 2010, brought in the Conservatives who have been in power since 2010. I've seen a lot of analysis saying that, look, this might be a historic defeat for the Conservatives on the July the 4th election. But what's the possibility of the Conservatives retaining power?
It would take a good move in the polls for the Conservative Party to win the next election. I think you'll hear them talking a lot about their achievements over the last 14 years. So Rishi Sunak, particularly in the debate yesterday, talked a bit about his time as Chancellor. So as Chancellor of the Exchequer, he put forward the furlough scheme, which kept about 14 million people in their jobs during the pandemic. The government was paying up to 80% of everyone's wages up and down the country. And so they'll be looking to talk about things like that. They'll be looking to talk about the £900 cut to national insurance, which is just another form of tax on income. They'll be talking about bringing down inflation from 11.1 to 2.1%. But, the Conservative Party will be talking about their record over the last 14 years and doing their best to make sure that people understand, although there may have been shocks from the war in Ukraine and there may have been shocks from the coronavirus pandemic, that they still have a good vision for the country.
And do you think that people will judge the Conservatives based on Rishi Sunak's performance, or they will look back all the way to maybe Boris Johnson and Liz Truss?
So I think they look back all the way. I think there's a chance that people will go looking back all the way to David Cameron. So in 2010, of course, we had David Cameron. Then in 2016, after the EU referendum, Theresa May took over, and then, of course, it was Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. But I think the judgment will be made over the entire 14-year period. Oftentimes, when it comes to elections, people ask, do you feel richer than you were 5 years ago? In this case, it will be, do you feel richer than you were 14 years ago? You will find the Conservative Party talking a lot about the tax rises that Labour would have to implement if they came into power. So Labour have announced a good number of policies that require funding. And so the Conservative line is that these will lead to about £2,000 of tax rises. So the Conservative Party will be talking a lot about that, as well as talking about their strong record over the last 14 years.
Thank you so much for your time, political commentator Nathaniel Oguniyi.